Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Bryce Simon and I are going to talk a little bit about the Final Four, which is coming up this weekend in San Antonio. Now that we have four teams that have locked themselves in, all four number one seeds. We're going to talk about Taylor Jenkins getting fired by the Memphis Grizzlies, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the 5 worst moves of the 2024 NBA offseason. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. What's going on, Bryce?
What's up, Sam? How are you? I scored some crazy brownie points with my wife today as I watched the 2 Elite 8 games on my computer, allowing her to watch whatever golf tournament was going on the big TV in the living room. And I said, babe, I just want you to know, like, I haven't said a word about putting the games on the big TV. I just got my computer out. Like, I would like some acknowledgement that I made this sacrifice. And she said, yes, I appreciate that very much. So, score 1 for me today, taking the sacrifice in the Simon household.
Your wife is a big Minwoo Lee fan?
She's a golf fan. She's never golfed in her life, but she's loves this stuff. Like, I don't know where it came from. It's a very soothing sport to watch on a Sunday afternoon, Saturday afternoon. You can fall asleep, take a nap, wake up, watch the final 3 holes. So I guess it just kind of fits her Sunday afternoon vibes. And over the last handful of years, if there was one game she would play on the PlayStation, it would be golf. Like, I don't know what the golf game is anymore. It was Tiger Woods whenever I was a kid. But if Roe bought the golf game for his PS5, I think he could get his mom to play with him. That would be the only thing.
Oh, dude, I'm all in. This is great news. This is great. Great information about Randy, first and foremost, as somebody who like goes and hit golf balls at the simulator like multiple times per week. This is important information. Good to know. Randy and I are gonna have to start sharing like betting tips now on golf.
No, I don't. No, we will. No, you will not. You got to talk to Randy about whatever you want. You start losing us money because she's betting on golf, and our friendship will take a major hit. She's been locked in on this little league thing that they play indoors where they play into the simulator. And
DGL.
Yeah. She was locked in. That was actually kind of cool because they had them mic'd up. And listen, I don't know many golfers, so I'm going to continue to reference Tiger Woods, but Tiger's team, those dudes are out there just like chilling. They're like laughing and joking, clowning each other. And I would just listen to it as I was watching other stuff, but it did seem somewhat entertaining. So
it was pretty fun. Actually, TGL was pretty fun. But you know what else was fun? The fact that I nailed the 4 Final Four teams. Do you know why I nailed them? Because
took all the number ones that Ken Palm said to do.
Very clearly 4 teams this year that were better than everybody else. And they were a very obvious level ahead, in my opinion. Duke, Florida, Auburn, and Houston. The whole season, it was those 4 teams.
Yeah.
I get it that nobody likes to take the number ones. I get it that it's not sexy. But like, honestly, I would bet you that like I kind of zigged while everyone else zagged because nobody likes taking the 4 number ones, right? It's just that the reality was that these teams were so much farther ahead than everybody else, right? Like, this is a no-brainer to me. Like they're just, I'm excited that we have the 4 teams in the Final Four that we knew were the 4 best teams all year. It never happens, but I think that they were just a level above this year. And I'm really excited to see it. I'm not going to the Final Four this year. This is like the first time in a decade that I'm not going. And really, it's just because with the transfer portal and everything, there's just not as much reason for me to go and like hang out with coaches and like go and like see everything, just because everyone's so crazy right now trying to build their rosters right now for next season, as opposed to before when it was, a little bit more of a celebration of college basketball weekend. So I am excited about the Final Four. I'm excited to watch it next weekend, but more than anything, we do have like a really fun prospect group here, in part because Duke got through. Cooper Flagg is going to be at the Final Four, which is great. He's going to get a real matchup against Houston that I think can cause him a lot of problems defensively, because they cause problems for everybody defensively. I mean, that was suffocating today against Tennessee. So I am very, very excited to see what ends up happening here with the Final Four. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the games today, yesterday, anything that you saw.
Well, I would just say my bracket got busted when Duke upset, well, actually when Mount St. Mary's upset my American University Eagles. And then, you know, when you pick one of those play-in games, you get both teams. And then, of course, Duke knocks off Mount St. Mary's. And what was funny, Sam, was I had one of my good friends in a bracket challenge on the block, and he texted me and goes, Bryce, do you know something nobody else does? Why did you take Mount St. Mary's to the national championship? Because as soon as they beat American, it only showed Mount St. Mary's the rest of the way. So, but I think if I would have taken it serious, I would have come very close to the 4 number ones. As far as the game this weekend, I am excited for these teams to move on. I thought we got some good games. We got the Florida comeback where NBA draft prospect Walter Clayton went crazy, and some of those dribble from inside the lane to the 3-point line and then just turn and shoot were absolutely ridiculous. I also got some good evaluation from JT Toppin in that game and Darion Williams in that game. I thought Toppin struggled with the Florida link. Thomas Houck, I feel like I don't say his name right.
No, Houck is right.
Houck is right. Not spelled how it sounds for anybody who's like, why can't you just say his name correctly? I thought he had a really good game. Like, I thought he played well. He made shots. I thought he defended well. Williams is a really tough matchup for anybody because he's so physical. But Houck, I thought, really showed out. You know, Condon was in that game. So we get those guys as well. And then you had the Duke-Alabama game where I even thought that some of the struggle for Mark Sears, you see some of the perimeter defense that Duke has that sometimes can go overlooked with this Duke team in terms of what they are in the defense.
The key to their team is that they are the best defensive team in the country to me.
James and Proctor, right? Like, they probably don't get enough credit for how they can guard you. And Malik being able to play, even though I think he's limited as a backup big, is really, really good on the defensive end. So while Cooper gets so much credit, and rightfully so, and Kahn continues to really show his all-around game, I think Duke's defense is really the story of why they've been so dominant all year and then now have made their way to the Final Four.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. Like, I think that Duke's defense was fantastic and on full display yesterday. You know, it felt like Alabama really tried to sell out to take away Cooper. And what did Duke do? They just decided, okay, we're going to ride the Kon Knipple, Common Maluach, pick and roll all the way to the title game. And, you know, Common, I thought, was fantastic yesterday. It was one of his best games.
I should have mentioned, obviously, he's part of this defensive impact as well. So, yes, definitely.
Yeah, and look, like, part of the reason that I felt okay about Duke in that game, I went on the Ion College basketball podcast 2 days ago and got asked, like, what do I think of the game? I'm just like, look, Alabama can go out and drop 25 threes on any night. Like, it might happen, but Duke's defense is almost like tailor-made to stop them from doing that because of the size of their perimeter defenders, the ability that they have to just kind of take away the 3-point line, and Maluach on the interior. The thing that Alabama is always going to try and do is get threes and shots at the rim. And that's just their entire offense. And if you can take away threes, you force them to drive more often. And if you have a 7'1" dude who has a 9'5" standing reach, it's going to be really hard to score. You know, Mark Sears, I thought, really struggled in that game. You know, obviously it's not a surprise necessarily given the size that he was going up against, but Maluach particularly, I thought, was absolutely fantastic. He was really, really good in that game. Obviously, like a real pick and roll partner for Knipple. That's been the way the whole season. I still don't see like a whole lot of offensive upside there, to be honest with you. Like, I think the hands, like anything out of his area in any way, shape, or form is a real problem.
Even showed up in that game. I thought it was. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Like, I think that having Khan, who's like a fantastic ball screen, reader, is great, and he processes the game at a really, really high level. It's been helpful for Malawach this year. And then defensively, he's just a monster on the interior. But that team didn't really have a whole lot on the interior that like could move him. Like Omaruyi is big, but like kind of similarly framed to Malawach, where it's hard for him to like move anybody out of the way and like anchor and like get lower than Malawach. Whereas guys in the NBA, like they're just going to get lower and kind of try and like anchor him out and like wedge him out. And I think that that's what he struggles with. So I thought it was a really good matchup for Malawach. I thought it was a matchup that he performed exceptionally well in a game that he had to perform exceptionally well in. And that's a credit to him. And I thought that it was just such a big performance from him that, there's a case that, all of him, Khan, and Cooper were like just the three best players on the court in that game.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up as well. Like, obviously, when I referenced like Malik Brown, in that game he only played 3 minutes, but throughout the season he's been a huge cog of their defensive impact. But what stood out in this game, with one reason he only played 3 minutes, is because Common played 31, which was the second most of the entire season for him, which kind of stood out to me in terms of being able to stay on the floor and play that many minutes. That's 10 more than his average. And so I'm interested to see in the Final Four, especially against a Houston team that is really, really good and has Jawan Roberts and our guy JoJo Tugler. Is he going to be able to stay out of foul trouble? Can he play that many minutes? Can he have the same impact? Roberts is a big physical dude. How is that going to look in terms of all of that? But I agree with you that I thought as a prospect game, Common played really, really well outside of just some of the hands things that showed up even in that game. But yeah, Duke is, it was an impressive performance from them, especially coming off what Alabama had done in the previous game, just going crazy from 3 and, scoring over 100 points.
Super, super impressive. And then Knipple was great in that game, obviously. Really, really fantastic. Just a great overall performance from Knipple. He was able to get into the lane when he needed to. Obviously knock down some shots at necessary moments. Look, like I think Knipple is a real dude. I do. I've had him as a top 5 guy for a little while now. I've shared that previously on this channel. I've had him. It'll be interesting for me. Like him versus Ace is like a real conversation. Him versus VJ is a real conversation for me. I just don't know what to totally do there yet.
No, Khan is really good. I've been a little bit slower. He's in that more than in that tier for me right now as well. And he's put up big time shooting numbers all season long. Even some of the lower volume dribble jumpers and stuff like that is good. Positive assist to turnover ratio, just the way he plays the game and the impact he's able to make throughout the game. And again, I think he got pegged as just a floor spacer, just a shooter, and that's not necessarily the case. As you mentioned, the Common pick and roll became a huge part of the Duke offense. And so I think that's what Khan has really been able to show, is he is able to be an advantage exploiter beyond just knocking down a catch and shoot. He's going to be able to attack a closeout. He may be able to make a mid-range jumper off attacking that closeout. He's definitely going to, I would trust him to make the necessary read if the next defender comes. Like all of those things offensively, it's definitely more than just like a catch and shoot guy that might be easy to peg him into. But obviously he can really, really shoot it along with all of that.
Yep. Okay. Florida, like we can talk about them very quickly. I thought Clayton was great. Clayton, like the ball screen reads and stuff really worry me. Like they were a problem for the first, 30 minutes of that game, 35 minutes of that game, really even. And then he just caught fire and was a monster. He's an unbelievable shooter, unbelievable player. The guy for them in this tournament, just undeniably, and a worthy first team All-American. Condon I thought was okay, but the guy worth talking about is Hauk. Yeah. I think I've said on this show previously that I would take Hauk over Condon long term. I still feel that way, obviously. I will say that like people look at the assist rates for Condon and Hauk, and I sent you this yesterday, and like I think that people probably overrate what those two are as passers and playmakers a little bit. So much of the Florida offense is like a trailer based offense where like one of those two guys will come, they'll get the ball, they'll like look at a DHO, or it'll be like a DHO reject with like a back cut back from the guy that could be taking the DHO, like a Walter Clayton, right? Like so many of the assists are predicated upon what the offense is, as opposed to like a read by Condon, by Hauk, etc. Like processing the game and then seeing like what's going on the court. I think that Florida's offense makes it really easy for those guys, but they're both capable of handling the ball. Hauk obviously is like a semi-real shooter. Condon, I think I trust him a little bit less as a shooter, but like can make them occasionally.
Sure.
Both guys that I think will play in the NBA. I think both guys that still probably would be better off going back to Florida, if I'm being completely honest. I think they still have some ways to round out their game. Condon defensively on the perimeter, certainly with his overall offensive game as well. Hauk still just really needs to shoot the ball. Like for that role, like he has to be a real shooter and he needs to get more comfortable handling the ball. But unbelievable game from Hauk on Saturday. He was, to me, the biggest difference. I thought he was the best player. Like all due respect to Walter Clayton, who went nuclear in the last 6 minutes or so, like he so often does. I did think Hauk was the best player on the court in that game.
Well, I think what he was doing defensively and on the boards was a huge part of that. And then he didn't obviously have the same overall impact as Walter Clayton Jr., but he did have 20 points. And I rewatched that game today. I wish I would have taken notes on exactly when his three-pointers were, but I feel like his have kind of been overlooked because he had some huge threes in that game late in the second half to help, spur that comeback. And I will say, like, with both of their passing, I agree with you that it could like get misconstrued as like creators, but I do think they are good passers. Like Condon gets the ball in and out of his hands. Like he had a really good
reads it quick.
He reads it quick. Like I think it was Elijah Martin curled off of him at the top. His man got hung up, and Condon didn't just like throw a line drive pass. He actually threw it up to the rim, and Martin just missed it. And so I think he reads things. He can make live dribble pass. The skill level in terms of a big man passer is really good. Now again, you're not running the offense through him where he's breaking the defense down and has all this gravity and stuff like that. But if you are a heavy DHO offense or a heavy short roll and then make a read out of that, I have a lot of confidence that Alex Condon will very easily make all of those reads and get the ball where it needs to go. And then I can't talk about him without talking about how hard he plays. Like you watch that dude run the floor going both ways, and it's absolutely ridiculous, let alone the boards.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm really, really excited for this Final Four. I think it's going to be great. And then Janai Broom today was fun. Comes back on the court, who he is. Right? He's going to come back. And
listen, I was in a group chat that was like, people literally are posting the videos like, don't watch it, because of what.
I didn't think it was that bad.
So I haven't gone back and watched it because everybody's acting like, here's what's crazy to me. I thought he hyperextended his knee and rolled his ankle along with whatever happened to his elbow. Like his leg landed awkward also. The fact that he came in and then banged the three right away, it was like, okay, this is over for sure. And this just really shows what this dude is all about because he'd already put up a double-double in the first half before all of this stuff.
Yeah, no, fun player. Interesting guy that I wonder if he can work his way into the first round here. With some really, really tough physical play here in the Final Four. Okay. Let's talk about Taylor Jenkins. But before we do that, we got to shout out our good friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money, sports, action, with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. You can combine your favorite basketball players with players from baseball, hockey, whatever you want to do. You know what we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the women's tournament. We're going to talk about Texas TCU tomorrow. Absolutely. The picks that I have for tomorrow. I've got Haley Van Lith, who's been awesome throughout the women's tournament. She is over 14.5. Madison Booker over 14.5. Taylor Jones for Texas over 9.5 as well. I think this is a great little trio. You're going to get 5.5 to 1, I believe, on your money here. This is what we want. I think Van Lith goes off for TCU. I think Texas wins in this game. So I am excited to watch the women's tournament tomorrow. And that's a great little spot for you guys to be in. You're going to be able to watch the game, have some real money sports action. And it doesn't just have to be women's basketball. If you think LeBron's going to get more than 24, if you think Giannis is going to go for 35, you can cook up the hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the code GameTheory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use the code GameTheory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Second sponsor today, NUTRAFOL. This year, there's nothing holding you back from loving your hair again. Hair is so much more than what you see on the surface. It's a reflection of what's happening inside. Let NUTRAFOL target the key root causes of your thinning hair and help you grow stronger, healthier strands from within. NUTRAFOL is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with NUTRAFOL. It is physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients. NUTRAFOL supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning, from stress to hormones to aging to nutrition and lifestyle. They do it through a whole body health method. You can start your hair growth journey with NUTRAFOL for a limited time. NUTRAFOL is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to NUTRAFOL.com and enter the promo code GameTheory. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend NUTRAFOL for healthier hair. NUTRAFOL.com, spelled NUTRAFOL.com. Promo code GameTheory. That's NUTRAFOL.com. Promo code GameTheory. Okay, Bryce. Let's talk about Taylor Jenkins. The Memphis Grizzlies, I think, surprised a lot of people by firing Taylor Jenkins with 9 games to go in the season over the weekend. Before giving my take, beyond just I will say from the jump here, I was not wildly surprised when I saw this. I was a little bit surprised by the timing, but I was not surprised that Taylor Jenkins is not going to be the coach of the Memphis Grizzlies anymore. What was your immediate reaction when you saw this?
I was shocked. I felt like Taylor Jenkins had a pretty good reputation, I guess. I will admit I don't always follow this coaching stuff. I definitely don't have any sort of intel or anything like that in terms of the happiness of things. I guess my thing is I watch them play. I find their offense very exciting, very interesting. There are some questions I have. I feel like defensively, I came away there was some intriguing things they did on the defensive end throughout games I watched this year. We talked about individual shortcomings in that in terms of who's your defensive stopper, but that's not really a coach thing, I don't think. So when you look at a team that is where they're at in terms of offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating, you just look at some of the stuff that I guess you often look at with coaches. I was surprised, and I know they're the first year of kind of this new offense, pace, whatever stuff. It just seemed weird to me that it wasn't like it was a catastrophe, right? And so that's why it surprised me. Along with the biggest surprise, Sam, was the timing. In terms of you didn't know 2, 3, 4. What happened over the last 4 weeks that made you solid in this decision, where maybe you could have integrated the new coach a little bit more for a playoff push as opposed to doing it with 10 games left in the season and then trying to integrate that person?
Okay. So here's where I want to kind of go with this. I want to lay out what the Grizzlies have been basically since the start of February, right?
Yep.
They're 12-14 since the start of February. They have a 116 defensive rating, which is not good by their standards, right? And I get that Jaren Jackson has been out for a little bit of a piece of that, but like that's not enough. You know what I mean? Like that's not enough for that. And he's played in like a not, insignificant number of those games, right? They do have a 117 offensive rating in those games. So like even in these games, they are a plus team. Here's the problem when you start to come down to it. Per Cleaning the Glass, this season, the Memphis Grizzlies are 6-15 against teams with a top 10 point differential in terms of net rating outside of garbage time. They have a negative 7.5 net rating in those games. That's just like nowhere near contender status. Against the bottom 10 teams, they are 22-5 with a plus 14 net rating. They are the third best in the league in those games. They are basically kicking the shit out of bad teams and not really contending against good teams. And that has become even more stark since February 1st. Since February 1st, Memphis is 0-8 against top 10 teams with a negative 13.2 net rating in that time. They lost by 7 in Isalo's debut against the Lakers. They lost by 21 to OKC, 20 to the Clippers. They lost to the Cavs by 9, lost to the Thunder by 17, lost to the Knicks by 1, lost to the Cavs by 6, lost to the Pacers by 14, Clippers by 14, Thunder by 13. The last time they beaten a playoff team was Milwaukee on February 2nd, but they are not a top 10 differential team. They beat Houston on January 30th. So that's like the real time they beat a top 10 team. But even in the game before that, they lost to the Knicks by 37. And then also within that window, they lost to the Blazers by 16, a team that is playing like fairly well right now. Maybe not quite top 10 quality, but like a real team that is playing with real like positive energy and making things hard on everybody else. So all of this says to me that this team is just not competing. And if you watch them against good teams, it does not feel like they have much of a shot. And I don't know if it's a confidence thing. I don't know if it's like it could be a scheme thing on some level. Like in a real level, my issue with them right now, offensively, is that everything in basketball is about creating advantages, right? You have to get the initial advantage.
Sure.
Their offense critically is so much about getting the initial advantage, right? And then being able to attack off of the advantage. When John Moran is out of the lineup, they don't have an advantage creator, but they also aren't really running a scheme that creates those advantages oftentimes, right? So like Desmond Bane, God love him, like he's a great finisher, like a play finisher who keeps your advantages by either finishing and scoring or shooting or by passing. Like he's a sharp passer who makes good decisions. Jaren Jackson Jr., I think, has gotten to the point this year where he can create advantages, but he's not one of the better guys in the league at it necessarily. He's just a really high level mismatch player at times. I don't think that they have enough dudes really to go out and create advantages, but also the scheme is not creating advantages either. And this is where we talk about, like, obviously they fired Noah LaRoche, Patrick St. Thomas, I believe as well, the two other assistants. LaRoche is the guy that like has really been responsible for a lot of the offense. Some of the scheme and like the spacing stuff is Tuomas Isalo, who has been elevated to the head coach.
Okay, so that's where my confusion was, because the guy they promoted, and I'm not going to try to say names because I know that I'm not prevalent on assistant coaches, but I knew enough to know an assistant coach had brought over this half-court spacing thing, but then everybody said the assistant coach that went with Taylor out the door was the guy that was supposed to be so that I have some confusion on who's credited
the spacing like principles, from what I understand, a lot of them are Isalo's, and like there are pieces of that in there. But for the most part, LaRoche was the guy that like really was in charge of the offense and was like running the offensive scheme and like flow and everything, right? My impression is that it just did not work out with LaRoche. And oh, by the way, like, there's been reporting about this now that like part of the reason they don't really run ball screens. They run ball screens at the least. They run ball screens less often than anybody else in the league right now. That was LaRoche's offense. So if you actually go back and you watch Paris last year, they ran a shit ton of ball screens with like TJ Shorts and Nadir Heafy. That like a piece of the Isalo offense is like ball screens. And then you like space around and you kind of make it work that way, right? The LaRoche thing was like, we're not going to run ball screens. And that just like did not in any way, shape, or form work. And that's what I've kind of gathered from talking to people around the league, right? So where I sit on this is my guess is that we see, especially once Ja comes back like fully, we see a lot more ball screens and we see where this goes.
So this was my one, not as intricate as like you explaining it there, but one of my biggest questions throughout the last part of the season, throughout the whole season going into the playoffs. It wasn't just, we talked about all the time, who's going to take the primary defensive matchups. It was, what is the hierarchy of this team on the offensive end? And what is your ceiling? If you talk about Jaren Jackson Jr., like we have loved Jaren Jackson Jr. up all season long, right? We've been so impressed with him. But you just brought, like, he has some shortcomings in terms of doing that or some limitations. Desmond Bane, same thing. To me, this is Ja Morant is the guy, and you need to run an offense that puts the ball in his hands consistently in the ways that's going to allow him to break down the defense. My pushback on that is, Sam, Ja has been unavailable for various reasons the last couple of seasons and has only played 44 games this season. Can I completely destroy what we'll call an offensive coordinator for building an offense that may try to find success without a single guy that can do that when the one guy that can isn't always available to me and my team for whatever reason?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take shots at Ja. I'm not even trying to support the coaching staff and their decisions. I'm trying to understand. And whenever I hear like certain things, that's where my mind would go, just playing devil's advocate of, can you blame them for maybe looking for another avenue or another path other than 20 Ja pick and rolls? He's the guy. Because then what do we do when he's not there? So like, I wonder if that was part of their calculation when they decided they were going to go down this road.
Yeah. I mean, here's kind of my overarching thing on this, right? The more I've thought about it, and I thought that when they decided to change their coaching staff around Taylor Jenkins last year, I thought that it might work, right? Like I thought, okay, like I'm willing to see this out and see what happens. But I think the reason that they did that is that they know that Taylor Jenkins is a good coach. It has nothing to do with Taylor Jenkins not being a good coach. Sometimes you just need a change.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the reality. Like if you're not going to change the players, which, you have Jaren Jackson, Ja Morant, who is, trade value is probably not as high as what it could be at some point. So you want to try and rehabilitate that before you move him. If you're even going to consider moving him, which I'm not convinced that they're going to do. And Desmond Bane, who's on like a completely reasonable deal, you probably need to change the offense or you need to change the coaches in some way. At the time, I thought this could work. Looking back on it with, full understanding of everything, I think it was probably a bad decision to just not get rid of Taylor last summer. I think that if you're going to change the entire staff around him and put in, like, frankly, a guy who is one of the best coaches in Europe, and then this other guy, Noah LaRoche, who is, this offensive, guy, and then you're going to put in, all of these other guys on the staff too. Like you have Anthony Carter there, and you have Saint, and you have like all these other dudes, right? Like, I think that it probably just would have made more sense to move on. And I think that I was wrong last summer in thinking that it could work. I'll take the L on that, like, is me thinking, but like my lesson that I'm taking from this is that if you're thinking about removing all of the assistance around a guy and you're creating a new comfort, like an entirely new, situation for him, you probably just have to get rid of the guy at the end of the day.
I agree with that. And listen, I've never came close to coaching at that level. But one thing I learned through coaching in college a little bit, and then again at a very different level, but like you have to have that chemistry with yours. I've seen poor assistant coach chemistry / staff chemistry completely tank a season and make it miserable for everybody.
Yeah.
And I've seen it completely uplift a team when everybody kind of has their role and knows it and does well. And as a head coach, I would always be feeling that I wasn't at my fullest as a head coach if I didn't have the assistants that I don't know, was most comfortable with. Comfort's a hard, I don't mean, because sometimes it's good to be out of your comfort zone, but I would struggle coaching with assistants that like I didn't pick, even if it could end up being a good thing. So I think I agree with you, I guess is my point, that if you're going to force, and I don't know that this assistant coaching staff was forced on Taylor Jenkins. Like, I don't know the ins and outs enough of that. But if it was like, hey, you have to get an all new assistant staff, whatever, it probably would have been better to just bring in a new head coach that was completely fully on board with all of the directions they were going to go.
So, and given all of this now, I don't have a problem with them firing Taylor Jenkins right now. Because here's the thing. They had a 0% chance to win the title this year based off of how they've played, based off of the way things were going. They had no shot. We just talked. They've lost their last 8 games against top 10 teams with a negative 13 net rating in those games. I think we feel pretty good that they just had no chance to win it this year. And if you knew, and I'm not saying, I mean, obviously, I guess I will say it, given that they fired the guy, but if you knew that you weren't bringing back Taylor Jenkins anyway, I don't really have a problem with them firing him now and seeing what you have with Tuomasi Salo and like the other guys on this staff and seeing where that goes. Because look, any coach that comes from Europe to the NBA will tell you it's a totally different deal, right? The way shoot-arounds are run, the way that you have to deal with players, the way that you have to deal with everything that goes into all of this, right? It's an entirely different beast. Seeing how he manages players, seeing how he is in the top spot is new information. Also, and this is small sample, I get it, but like the Ja, Dez, and Jaren core has just never had a coach that is different than Taylor Jenkins since they've been good, right? So you need to understand how they look under a new coach on some level. And look, you're going to get somewhere between 13 and 17 games probably. Maybe you get a few more. Who knows? But I want to know. Like, I would want that information. I don't have a problem with Zach Kleiman doing this. And by the way, you know, Zach said in his press conference, which was 2 minutes and 40 seconds, which was hysterical. I loved it, kind of. Yeah. He was just like, this was my decision and mine alone. He said it multiple times. And I think that is important to know here at the very least.
The other thing I'll say is, I always say this about coaching decisions in particular. There's so much data we don't have. I said this when the Pistons coaching search was going on 2 different years. I was like, guys, we don't know. We don't know why JB did a certain thing with his team. Like, you have to look at the roster. But more importantly, so much of coaching goes on in locker rooms, on the bench where you don't hear what is said, in meetings, you know, taking care of players, having those relationships, all of that. And so I try not to judge any of these decisions too harsh, because Zach Kleiman knows a billion times more about Taylor Jenkins and what they've tried and what the understanding was and how the players are reacting to it and all of those things. I'm just trying to give some other perspectives to it. I will push. I want to throw this at you, Sam, in terms of the timing.
Yeah.
Here's my problem with the timing. 17 games is a small enough sample to still be a honeymoon stage. And I've witnessed an organization in a different league, the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs, hire an interim head coach based off the honeymoon stage of the last 3 seasons. 3 games.
Ohio State just did it last year with John Diebler or Jake Diebler. I'm sorry. And it was it looks like it's the wrong hire. We'll go with.
So my thing is, if you do this a month ago, and maybe there was information Kleiman still needed to get to feel 100% about letting Jenkins go, I think if you do it a month ago, the sample size is big enough that you get through the honeymoon stage. You get through the stage of, hey, they're doing different things, playing different lineups. They went from 30th in the NBA in ball screens to 12th. We weren't ready for that. And then you get the 10, 15 games of substance where everybody's kind of figured things out in terms of, okay, this is who they are. Almost every player is going to adjust positively to the new coach for a little bit, right? Like lots of times that's going to happen. It's something new. You kind of like, okay, I'm in, until you aren't in anymore. That would be my pushback, is this isn't long enough to get out of the honeymoon stage and get the information I would want if I was trying to make a decision on the interim head coach versus bringing in somebody from the outside.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with any of that, but I don't think it's unfair to like get a feel for how he deals with the players more than anything.
And that's where it's more on the inside, right? Like Kleiman is going to be able to evaluate him on a daily basis in terms of, it is long enough to see if Ja enjoys playing for him and likes the new system and that type of. And at the end of the day, it matters what Ja thinks, because I think he's the most important player within the organization to make them title contenders. And does Bane like it? How do the rookies play?
The big one here is Jaren, because Jaren has a contract decision.
That is a great point in terms of the contract situation with Jaren. He is the most important in terms of keeping happy because of that situation specifically. That is true.
And to be clear, like from everything I know about Jaren Jackson, he is like the lowest maintenance dude that you will find. And like, there's no worries about like him feeling, concerned, like, oh my God, like it's going to be a disaster. He's going to be so picky about this stuff. Like, I don't get that impression at all, but I do think it's important for him to have a feel before he signs a long-term deal. Right. And he'll have opinions on it. Certainly. Last thing I do just want to note here, right? Maybe two more things. This doesn't have to be anybody's fault.
Sure.
Like,
yeah,
it's not like this team's been very successful outside of last season's like injury spilled disaster, right? Like injury, mess. This team's been very competitive for a while, and Taylor Jenkins was a huge part of that. And he was a huge part of their development of these young guys over the years. And they now have like this awesome core of young players around Ja and Dez and, Jaren that are entering their prime. Like it's not his fault that it was time, right? Sometimes it's just time to get a different voice in there, to get like a different, feel. The odds are, frankly, the coach that you hire is probably not going to be as good as Taylor Jenkins, because Taylor Jenkins is quite good. But sometimes just getting a different voice is helpful. Like I've felt that way about the Penguins for a while now in Pittsburgh, right? Like Mike Sullivan has brought them like Stanley Cup playoff success and Stanley Cups, and it just feels stale anytime I watch a Penguins game, frankly. And like they have bigger problems in terms of the salary cap and everything, but like it just feels like a different voice would be valuable for them in some way, shape, or form. It's the same in Memphis to me.
We've seen it play out consistently. I mean, again, I know people probably get annoyed me going to an NFL thing, but Andy Reid gets fired by the Eagles because it had gotten stale. He goes to Kansas City. He wins multiple championships in Kansas City, but you know what else happened? The Eagles have won 2 championships since Andy Reid left. We're seeing it play out right now, not at the same championship level. JB Bickerstaff gets fired from Cleveland, and I'm not, for whatever reason, Kenny Atkinson comes in, has made that team better, while also JB has gone to a different place and is doing maybe an even better job than what Kenny Atkinson is doing in Cleveland. Like again, to your point, this doesn't mean Taylor Jenkins is a bad coach. It doesn't mean Zach Kleiman made a bad decision if Taylor Jenkins goes somewhere and does a really good job. And it also doesn't mean they may not bring in a head coach that is just like the right fit. Like it can just be a wrong. This is sports, Sam. And it's not robotic. I'm not like trying to like make a war on the numbers. Like, that's not me at all. I love analytics and I'm glad it's a part of what we do now. But we do sometimes forget the human side of things, and that sometimes this can happen. And it's okay. And to your point, it's not always somebody's fault. And it doesn't mean somebody sucks or did their job bad or something like that. Sometimes it's just time.
Yeah, I agree. The second piece of this is, like, I've seen people like speculate about like Zach Kleiman or whatever. They're like, Zach Kleiman feels very secure there to me. And he's done a great job. Like, you look at the way he's evaluated players and you look at the way he's brought in talent, absolutely should be secure there, in my opinion. Truly, like, if an organization, like if the Grizzlies got rid of Zach Kleiman, he would be snapped up in
a heartbeat,
10 seconds by some team. Like, it would take such a limited amount of time that it would like make people's heads spin.
Yes.
He is so well regarded around the league as like being not like somebody that people enjoy dealing with, but also just really, really sharp. So I don't see anything remotely close there that Kleiman would be in any way on the hot seat. That just feels so premature to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, now maybe he gets the hire wrong again, and something like, yes, everything else would be just like looking at things in the future that isn't worth talking about right now. I'm with you 100%. And I agree that if they did decide to move on for whatever reason, there would be organizations opening their doors wide open to bring him in and let him start making decisions for their team.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. Okay. Look, we can talk about the Grizzlies at some point when we do like their offseason preview in terms of like making more substantive changes. We're starting to get into offseason preview zones too, Bryce, by the way. Like, that's going to be a thing that we have to dive into.
Who's not going to lead us off this year? The Detroit Pistons. How about that?
They are not. They are not. We're going to be talking about different teams. Okay. So let's move to the next thing that we want to talk about today. We're doing the 5 worst moves of the offseason in 2024, the moves that have backfired so spectacularly. We will be doing the 5 best offseason moves on Thursday. Like, that is our plan, and we're really, really excited to kind of dive into those as well. But we want to start with worst because, why not? Let's go for it. So we have a list of 5 here. I've shared with you the list of 5. Honorable mentions that like I at least considered, but ultimately did not decide to put in. The Klay Thompson sign and trade, like, Klay has not been a catastrophe for Dallas. He hasn't been great. Like, he's averaging like 14 points or whatever, but given the money and like given everything, he hasn't been a terrible mess. It's just that their whole team is, I know that they've been better with Anthony Davis now that he's been back, but like, their whole situation is now in such a weird sense of disarray with the Kyrie injury and everything that I do wonder about how that's going to age now long term over the course of the next 2 years beyond this one. I at least wanted to bring it up as one that could end up looking not great. The Mikal Bridges deal. It's interesting. Given how successful they have been, it was impossible for me to put it on here. Obviously, it is a lot to give up for Mikal Bridges, given that he's averaging 18, 3, and 3 on like 50, 35, 80. And the defense has been like up and down. Let's go with. I couldn't put it on here because I still think that a huge piece of this deal was getting Jalen Brunson to sign the very cheap extension that he did. That is going to save them like 30 million in space, 20 million in space over multiple years, 20 million in space at least over multiple years. So I couldn't, like, in good conscience, put that on here, especially because the Knicks have been great this year. Like, they've been really, really good. The KCP to Orlando move, like, that's 3 years, 66 million. He's averaging 8 points a game. He's playing defense. He fits within their mentality of what they're looking for.
This would have been
But it
one
just-
for me. And here, like,
Yeah.
I think part of that one was just the expectations. I would guess if you went and like looked at 2024 NBA free agent grades, that one got so many A's and A pluses, and
Yeah.
this is this is the signing of the offseason, and I'm sure we said I shouldn't have put words in your. I'm sure I said it. Like this is this is one of those examples, Sam, where I think the process was right for Orlando. Like I think the process was correct. The result just hasn't been there because he just hasn't made shots at the level you wanted him to.
So can I push back a little bit against the process? I wonder if their process should have been getting more offensive firepower
Than simply a guy that could knock down catch and shoot threes.
Yeah. And using some of these trade chips that they have, like 2 first-round picks this year, to go out and go get like a more offensively inclined player like an Anthony Simons or something, making $20+ million a year.
Sure.
Yeah. This ended up not being a great signing. It was number 7 for me.
Okay.
Number 6, and again, we're not into the top 5, but the one that I really strongly considered was Washington's Denny Avdia trade.
I actually thought about this one as well as I was looking through moves because Denny's really good.
So look, they got a lot of value for him. Like Bob Carrington's going to be an NBA player. They have another first-round pick coming. Like there is real value here going their way. And at the time, I kind of thought it was like a win-win move. But the Blazers are going to like this deal will definitely be on the Thursday version for the Blazers. Like I can assure people of that.
Yes.
In the last 40 games, Denny is averaging 18.5 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, shooting 49, 38, 77. He's kind of taken that next leap into being like a real power wing. I still think that there's a chance this deal ends up okay for Washington, given that they have another first-round pick plus Bub. But given that Denny's also on like this incredible contract, this deal will be very high on the next episode on Thursday. Like we will be talking about this substantially, given that he's on a 455 right now.
Yeah, and maybe the Wizards looked at it as like by the time we're actually ready to compete, he won't be on that deal anymore. So it for us, it's not that great because by the time they're really winning games, he's going to be on to his next contract. And so maybe they just felt like, hey, this is really good value, as you mentioned, in terms of getting more young players. And the hard part with Denny is I think Denny would be a really valuable player on a rebuilding team also. Like I think the way he plays would be perfectly fine with that. I think there's some guys where that doesn't make as much sense. So I still can understand why Washington made the move, even though I'm just like, this was, like you said, I think this is one of those it will definitely be talked about on Thursday. And because it will be talked about so positively for one team, you almost kind of have to say the other team was a little bit of a negative.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay. Let's get started here. The 5th worst move of the 2024 NBA offseason. This is one that like I put on here at number 5, not because it's like, I mean, it's pretty harmful and like could theoretically shift a title race, honestly, by not getting the right guy in here. But also it just had no chance of ever being successful. It's the Denver Nuggets using their mini mid-level on Dario Saric. Dario Saric, by the end of last season, I know that he had like a decent season in Golden State to start the year, but by the end of last year, he could not play. They couldn't play him. I do not understand why in the world Denver thought that this was going to be a thing.
Well, here's the other thing is they had invested in this role already with young guys. And I think this deal looks even worse if Deron Holmes never gets hurt because this was signed before Deron Holmes tore his Achilles at Summer League, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember being a little bit perplexed when the deal was announced. and it was before that, and it's like, oh, he tore his Achilles. Okay, well, now that deal doesn't seem as bad. But the reason where I think this is bad process overall is you just gave Zeke Naji that 4 or 5 year deal or whatever the previous offseason. You take a first round pick that you traded up for in Deron Holmes, and then you use the mini mid-level. And it's not just money this year. That's a 2-year deal with a player option that I assume Dario Saric will take because he's not getting $5 million on the open market this offseason. And so, like, it's just when you're limited in resources, and I'm sure this was going to be part of your point, Sam, you have to be good on the margins. And this seemed like not doing well on the margins. Like, to me, you just have to roll with the young guys. You gave Zeke Naji a contract. You drafted Deron Holmes high. At the time, you didn't know he was going to be out for his rookie season. Like, this isn't where those limited resources should have gone.
I mean, imagine if they had signed, like, Gershon Yabusele. Like, or if they had signed, like, anybody who can give them real minutes.
Well, like
seriously, if they, like, the name that I brought up was, like, I really wonder if Buddy Hield would have done this contract instead of the Golden State deal that, like, is a little bit more money, but, like, was a more uncertain role.
Well,
right.
So some other names. I don't know the timing of all this, and I do want to say you never know where players want to play and what they want guaranteed whenever they're looking. So when I say the name Taurean Prince, I understand that maybe going to Milwaukee had other circumstances and factors that could have been in play. But that was a name that showed up just as I look at numbers that fell below what Saric signed for. He signed for below that. Gary Trent Jr. signed below that. As you mentioned, maybe you could convince Buddy Hield with a certain role. And maybe that's what it was, is they weren't willing to guarantee, and I shouldn't even say guarantee. I don't know that those guys got guarantees with the teams they signed with. But, I mean, all of these guys are on mins. Tyus Jones is on a min. Like, there were names out there. Like, even Andre Drummond would have been better process, right? Even though he's ended up not being good. At the time, we thought he was going to be good.
No, we didn't. But, like...
we didn't think he was going to... I guess not. Like, you already have DeAndre Jordan, so that's probably not a good name.
Yeah, like...
You already have that
on the
like, roster.
We've named, like, 7 or 8 names already where this could have worked, right? And they chose not to do any of those names. Dario Saric, in the minutes that Saric has played this year, they lose them by 20 per 100 possessions. Like, they lose those minutes by 20 points per 100 possessions. That's bonkers. That's crazy town. And by the way, like, he does have a player option for next year.
Yeah.
They might get out of it. Like, there was a report in a Spanish newspaper, like, earlier this week that, like, Real Madrid has interest in him. And, like, they might be able to, you know, like, it might be a Vezenkov situation where, you know, Croatian players decides, like, I want to play, and Real Madrid can afford to go and, you know, pay Dario, maybe not 5, but they can pay him more money. But, like, if you're Dario and Real asks you, you know, will you come here for 3.5, and you actually get to play and you get to be like this, one of the star players on Real Madrid over in Europe. I don't know. Like, I think that might be something that's appealing to him. We'll see if he ends up doing it. If he doesn't, like, you know, I'm so interested to see kind of how this goes now, because they, again, like, he can lock into that player option for $5 million if he really wants to next year.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, we've outlined it. It seemed like bad process to me right from the start, whenever you've already put resources into it. And then just, what did you expect you were going to get anyway? And for a team that was so capped salary wise and really needed to win on the margins, it just looks really rough whenever you had, like you mentioned, all of the names we brought up. And I think you could probably even go through some more where it's like,
so like, here's the home run answer, right? Like, I have the name, and maybe they weren't willing to do this because they've been down this road before and, like, they drafted him and everything. But like, Malik Beasley's making $6 million this year.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, do you think that Malik Beasley might have enjoyed going to play with Nikola Jokic? Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he would have wanted to do something else. Maybe he preferred Detroit, right? But you can pay Malik Beasley $5 million, you get to go play with Jokic, or you can pay him $6 million, you get to go play in Detroit. Like going into last year,
yeah,
or going into like this before this season,
yeah,
I feel like I don't know Malik Beasley, but like most players, I think would have said, "Oh, I get to rehabilitate my stock with Jokic. Let's do it that way instead."
Yes, I would agree that most players, for $1 million, you feel like you're going to recoup that, because people at the time signing with the Nuggets, you would say to yourself, what I do is going to be looked at in a way that is substantiated, where if I go play for the 14-win Pistons, nobody's going to care what I do because they're the 14-win Pistons. Now, I realize the season hasn't played out like that, and it's very different. But last offseason, if you were advising Malik Beasley what to do, it would have been long-term, you make more money signing $5 million for a contender than $6 million for the worst team in the league, where you can hit 1 billion threes. Nobody's going to think it's real because they're not playing competitive basketball. Again, the season has played out entirely different, but I agree with you that we're closing in on 10 names that just would have made so much more sense than what ended up happening.
Okay. Number 4, the Chicago Bulls signed Patrick Williams to a 5-year, $90 million contract that, again, at the time, just was nonsensical. Like, it was a deal that completely blew my mind. I understood, like, why they did it, but it's just crazy to me that this is where we're at. Patrick Williams this season is averaging 8.7 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, shooting 38, 34, 72. Those are career worst numbers in terms of true shooting percentage by like 6% true shooting percentage. Despite the fact that he's like upped his 3-point rate, by the way, which like you would expect that to go in the inverse way. His usage percentage is actually like at a career high level. It's basically the same as last year, but like it's slightly higher than where it was. I honestly thought he was better like the last 2 years on defense. Like I thought he was actually pretty okay. But this year, like he's just been okay again. Like I thought he was pretty good the last couple of years. And this is the big question I have for you from Dejounte. Who were they bidding against to give Patrick Williams 5 years, $90 million?
Dejounte, you and I were like on the same wavelength. Thank you for putting my question to Sam in the comments, because that's what I was going to say as well. And I feel like this is a lot of times whenever we really question contracts, that's what it comes down to. It was like, he just, I know he's a former top 5 pick and all of the stuff, but like, what had he done? I guess the 3-point percentage, maybe it would excite a team enough. Like, I guess there was still enough tools, but at best, he's a 3-and-D wing, right? That the 3-point percentage had been really good there. It still really is for his career, even though this year is a little bit down. And I mean, it sounds crazy to say. I think the mechanics look funny, but I mean, you got to trust the percentages with how much he has shot.
Well, no. Like here's the thing. The reason the mechanics are important to call out is because the mechanics stop him from shooting at volume.
Sure.
Like, yes, he's taking 4 threes this year, which is a career high, but he's also playing, 25 minutes a game. And like his entire role is to space and shoot the 3.
Yeah.
So like the fact that the mechanics are funky is why he doesn't end up making and taking more of these 3s.
Yeah. And the defense isn't that impactful. Like I have some positive notes whenever I look back through stuff, but it's not overly consistent. He's not consistently in the starting lineup for that team. It's just like this contract's probably not going to end up on our worst contracts in the NBA would be my guess, just because the number is still This might not end up on our worst contracts in the NBA. It might, just because of the length. But as I look at him, like, that's going to be the non-tax MLE pretty soon, which I'm not saying he's that level of player. I think by the end of it, it's not catastrophic, right? Like, you would be able to get off of it, attach it in a like, I wonder if he ends up being a guy that's just like, hey, we need $18 million to match in a trade. So he gets moved. And then that team, plays him as their ninth man. And then they need $18 million.
He has his 4 years left. Like, nobody's going to be excited to take on the 4 years.
That is true. That is it. It's going to be whether he can at least be a rotation player, but he's already aging out of the, this is still kind of exciting what we saw pre-draft all around two-way wing forward to like, it's 3-and-D wing where the defense is okay. And outside of the 3-point shot, like, he does do some mid-range pull-up stuff, but none of it's efficient because he's under 30. He's right at 38% overall. So, and he never gets to the free throw line. It's not like he rebounds crazy. I don't know. It's tough.
I mean, like, even removing this last year, they paid him on the basis of the previous 2 years being 10 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, equal assist to turnover, shooting 46, 40, 83. But because, you might look at that and think like that's pretty okay, because he ends up not taking a ton of threes still, he still had a true shooting percentage over those 2 years that was 3% below league average, despite the fact that he takes very easy shots, basically like off the catch or off of like these mid-range, one dribble pull-ups that nobody cares about him taking.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I see the path on defense for sure. Like, I think he's had a lot of moments defensively where I'm like, this is pretty interesting and this is pretty positive, but I don't see a whole lot of pathway here offensively right now.
Yeah, no, like, the role is just very limited, so he has to be really, really good in it. The last thing I will say is, like, I just don't find him overly impactful when I watch a game. You know what I mean? Like, you just turn on a game and you take notes and you Patrick Williams because he was a former top 5 pick, and you want to see, are you missing something? And it just doesn't, like, even eye test wise, it doesn't. I don't walk away, you know what, like, the numbers are rough, but, or, the reputation is this, but I think he's making ground. I walk away not being overly impressed a lot of times. And then you look at the efficiency numbers, you look at the on-off, all of that stuff. And in general, for a guy that got a 5-year deal at almost $20 million a year, it's pretty negative right now in terms of what you would want in terms of the return on that investment.
I think that's right. That's what my main concern is at this point here. Okay. Number 3 also involves the Chicago Bulls, but they're not the team that signed the player. DeMar DeRozan's sign and trade to the Sacramento Kings. So DeMar himself has not played that poorly this season, and I will put hand up. I thought this deal was going to be totally fine. I thought that, like, you can make a case for it to make sense. I said at the time that I was comfortable with it, but like that the variance here is pretty high. I thought there was a chance it was going to go very poorly. I thought there was a chance that it could go really, really well because they needed another guy to go out and be able to create offensive moments, right? So far, DeMar DeRozan is doing his normal thing. He's averaging 22, 4, and 4. If you look at the true shooting percentage, it is currently right at league average. If you look at the 4 years before this, it was 3% above league average. So it's not that far out of line from where it is and where it has been previously. It's not that he's a worse player. It just has not worked out in any way, shape, or form in terms of the fit. It just has not in any way been what Sacramento needed. And it feels like to me that their offense just doesn't have quite as much flow, even when DeMar was there, or I'm sorry, even when De'Aaron was there. And now it's, they have like Bulls redux right now with Levine and DeRozan, and you're just adding Sabonis as an upgrade over Vucevic previously. So, I love DeMar. Like, I am probably like one of the big, people in the public sphere, the media, that like really hammers home how great of a career I think DeMar has had. Being able to score like he has over the course of the number of years that he is unequivocally, without debate, without even a question, a Hall of Fame basketball player. This guy, by the end of the season, I believe, is going to be in the top. He won't be by the end of the year. He'll actually be pretty close. By the end of the year, he might be in the top 25 all time in NBA scoring.
He's awesome.
Like a fun player, an incredibly fun player, and it just has not in any way, shape, or form worked out for the Sacramento Kings.
Yeah, this is one where like I don't even like talking negatively about it because I just really enjoy DeMar DeRozan as a player, and I don't even think it's an indictment, as you outlined, of him as a player. Even though at age 35 you can expect a little bit of decline, which if you just look at the raw numbers, you see a little bit just in terms of points per game is down a couple, assists per game is down one, all of that stuff. I remember I did a off-season like video not breakdown, but just like study of DeMar DeRozan before I'd really got into things. And I came away so impressed with his passing. I didn't respect and understand how good of a passer he was in those years with I think it was San Antonio. I think it was coming off
San Antonio particularly, he was awesome.
Yeah, I think it was the last San Antonio year was what I went and really watched film, like really took a deep dive in that offseason. I was like, man, this guy really creates and passes, and it's a guy that everybody in the world can tell you what DeMar DeRozan is going to try to do, right? Where he's going to try to get to on the floor, and then what is he going to do when he gets there, Sam? He's going to shot fake, and he's going to shot fake, and he might hit you with a reverse pivot and pivot back or whatever. Everybody knows it, and he still gets it done. And I think that's what's so cool about what he does. But at the end of the day, you gave this contract to a 35-year-old wing, and you ended up trading arguably your best player a few months later. That makes it a negative. Like, you ended up trading your best player. Yeah. And in this, you didn't just sign him with cap space. You sent out a couple second-round picks, okay, and a 2031 first-round pick swap as well. It would be one thing if you only signed him with your cap space. It's another when you had to send out assets to acquire him along with the contract you gave him.
And on top of that, like, look, I don't want to blame DeMar for this, right? Like, I don't think that that's totally fair. But in the minutes where DeMar played with De'Aaron Fox, they actually like genuinely lost those minutes this season. They went at a 116.4 offensive rating and a 117.3 defensive rating. And that wasn't exactly in a small sample. It was in a fairly sizable sample of 1,000 minutes, 1,115 minutes. Like, you kind of saw what we had here in, like, with Sacramento, right? And it just didn't work. And part of it was defensive. Like, they had no chance to stop anybody with DeMar and Sabonis and everybody on the court. It was just not a move that made a ton of sense. I'm interested to see where we go here.
That was my next question is like, okay, DeMar's, like, the contract isn't crazy, right? Like, it's just under 25 next year. The third year actually isn't even fully guaranteed. I think it's 10 million guaranteed. It's just over or just under 26. Is there a market? We talk all the time with contracts and the length, right? Like, the Patrick Williams contract is bad because of the years, along with, I mean, it's still an overpay, but because of the years. DeMar on 2 years in the mid-20s, he's still getting buckets. Is there a team out? I feel like there's a team out there where that makes a whole lot more sense, right? Like, he makes more sense, and they can take on that money. Is Sacramento
on top of it, he only has 10 million guaranteed in 2026, 27. So it's not like a crazy, guarantee or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's very possible. Like, it's very, very possible they could be able to move it. Yeah, very possible.
It'd be interesting.
It'll be interesting.
They're an interesting team this offseason with him.
I mean,
like none of that stuff has worked since the deadline. Like I thought it was going to be better. I thought that stuff was going to be better in general than in what it has been. So
yeah, and on top of it, like, look, the Kings are actually going to end up being like slightly better this year. Like they're going to make the play-in this year in all likelihood. I don't know about better, but like they're going to be, in a, like they finished 9th last year. They're going to finish 9th this year. They're going to have way fewer wins, obviously, but like I feel way worse about where they're at.
Sure.
As an organization right now, having had to trade De'Aaron, and now they have to split up DeRozan and Levine this summer. Like you can't do that again.
Yeah.
We can't sit here and do that whole thing again. That just doesn't feel right to me.
Sure.
Okay. Number 2 on the worst moves of the offseason. I like kind of combined these two things here, actually. Really, the thing I want to talk about is the Paul George signing with the Philadelphia 76ers, but also like the decision to extend Joel Embiid is something that we have to talk about, and long term might end up like cratering this era of the 76ers if he just like can't stay healthy, right? But the Paul George signing, right? This is something that I think we all thought would go really well. I think, a number of people, probably including myself, I don't really remember where I was on this. I think I said that I liked the deal because in general, I'm a big Paul George like believer. I think that we all thought the Sixers were the big winner of the offseason.
Yep.
And now we're looking at it after Paul George averaged 23, 5, and 4 and was awesome on defense for the Clippers in 2024. And this year he played 41 games and averaged 16, 5, and 4 with what I believe is a low in field goal percentage going back to 2018, a low in 3-point percentage over the last 4 years, and actually the third worst mark of his career. And even just like from the foul line, it's a low since 2015. It just has not in any way, shape, or form gone well. He hasn't been as impactful defensively as what we would have hoped. And he's not getting younger. He turns 35 in about a month.
Yeah. Listen, I thought it was a really good move. I'm sure, like, I don't know if we did official winners and whatever of the offseason and all of that, but like I didn't think he was going to leave. I remember listening to that, Kawhi signed his extension and then you just assumed that he wouldn't sign it. If Paul wasn't going to sign it, the Clippers would pony it up, all of that. And so I never thought it was actually going to come to fruition. So when it did, I was like, Philly played this perfectly. We said, a few months before that or a handful of months before that, like, what are they going to do with James Harden? Like, how's this all going to work? Like, what are they going to do? And they figured it out pretty quick. It looked like, right? They brought in their third star. In theory, the idea of Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Joel Embiid is about the perfect mesh of 3 stars you can put together in terms of if they're healthy and what they're good at and complementing each other. It doesn't seem like there's a ton of overlap between those 3, but it was always the injury concerns. And people always brought it up, and it played out in catastrophic form this season, starting with Embiid and then continuing with Paul George. But to your point, I think what's scarier is in the 41 games he has played, playing 33 minutes, it's been really just not good, Sam. He has not looked anywhere close to that two-way wing we all loved that Paul George was throughout the rest of his career.
Yeah, so at some point in the next few weeks, we'll be doing worst contracts in the NBA. I mean, Paul George is definitely in the top 3. I don't know if it's number 1 or number 2 or number 3, but it's very, very high. And The Joel extension is also up there. Like that is a real.
That's a scary contract right now with in
scary
situation.
Yeah. And like, you don't want to crush anything based off of injuries. Like I feel bad for the way that this is all worked out. And honestly, this probably could be number one, combining the two things, right? Like I think there's a real case for this to be number one. But my issue is that you probably didn't need to do this more than anything. Like you had him for another year, like completely locked in, if I remember correctly. Like it's not like he was coming up on a player option. You could have done this summer. You could have waited to see how he came back from his injury that he suffered last year and didn't look right in the playoffs. Like you could have taken the time to figure out, what does this look like? And by the way, like he still had a player option at 60 million in 2026-27 that now is torn up, and you've given him, 59, 64, 69 over the course of his 32, 33, and 34-year-old seasons, when I think all of us probably think that those years are not going to be good.
Yeah, so he was locked in for this year and next year. And then, as you mentioned, he had the player option for 26-27. Instead, they ripped that up. They give him 3 for 193, essentially, with a player option on the end of that. So, in 20,
you know what, Bryce? As we're talking about this is number one. This is not number two.
69 million in 28-29 player option in his age 34 season for a guy that you've had in your organization his entire NBA career. And I would assume, I don't know how this always works, but they should have as much medical information about Joel Embiid as anybody, right? Like they should know. They've been a part of it from day one. I want to quickly pivot back to Paul George and the contract, Bradley Beal this year. For all of the hate that Bradley Beal gets, Bradley Beal played 48 games this year and scored 17 points a game on 51, 40, 81. So like when you're talking about like these contracts and production and stuff, like Bradley Beal was putting up those numbers still. We're making a pivot. We had a turnover, but we came back and we adjusted. We changed it on the fly. I love it.
We're changing it on the fly. This is definitely the worst set of moves of the offseason, for sure. They now have Paul George and Joel Embiid locked in over the next 4 years for over $100 million. They have no space. They have no flexibility. They have no ability to really change anything with their team. And by the way, Paul George is a player option in that final year, which I'm guessing he will probably be exercising. Next year, Paul George and Joel Embiid make, I believe that the number is about $107 million against a salary cap that I'm trying to remember here what exactly the number is. I think it's 150-ish, somewhere in that ballpark. Salary cap next year is 154 in all likelihood. So the Paul George thing is a move that just hasn't worked out, right? It's a move that we thought made sense. It's a move that probably could have made sense and could have worked. The Joel one to me is an own goal that was avoidable if you had just been patient and waited and seen where this would have gone this year.
Sure.
And that's what the bummer is. That ultimately, that is why the more I think about this is the clear number one. This is this is now a guy that's taking up over the course of their next, let's see here, 5 years realistically? He's taking up 35 to 33% of their salary cap in all of those years, basically. And that's just
Yeah.
not like they had the best minimum signing of the offseason in Gershon. They got a steal at number 16 with Jared McCain, or 17, whatever the pick was. And they got an undrafted rookie in Justin Edwards that like looks pretty good, that we just talked about on the podcast last week.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
It's like,
And you still ended up having the worst offseason probably because these deals are so bad.
it's funny because we just talked about the Nuggets not winning on the margins with their moves, and Philly like crushed the margins this offseason with Gershon. Like even bringing back Kelly Oubre, like they did really good on the margins, and the big money is just really bad money right now. And as we mentioned, if these two guys come back, and if somehow Paul George is healthy and kind of can get going, and Joel figures out exactly what's wrong with his knee, and even if he gave him, 2 good years, 3 good years, all of a sudden we can be having a completely different conversation. But based on the history of things right now and the money tied up, as you mentioned, it's 65% of the cap between those two guys for the next 1, 2, 3 years for sure. That's a lot of cap for guys that it's not looking good in their 30s, and the injury history and where things are trending right now.
Yeah, it's real bad. Okay. The deal that I had at 1 going in, and I'll explain why I had it at 1, but it's clearly 2 now that I think about it. And now that we've gone through this, is the Dejounte Murray to the New Orleans Pelicans deal. And the reason I had this at 1 originally is because not only is Dejounte taking up like a ton of your cap at this point, but you actually traded him for a better player in Dyson Daniels, who, like, I'm sorry, Dyson Daniels is a better player than Dejounte Murray, just is. The things that he brings defensively, the fact that like he can play off of Trey at a really high level. There's a reason that the Hawks, frankly, are a better basketball team this year, even though like they've only had Jalen Johnson for like half the season, right? It was removing Dejounte Murray and bringing in Dyson Daniels, who has been one of the 5-7 best defenders in the league this year, plus playing a role on offense. And oh, by the way, they gave up 2 first-round picks with it.
Yeah.
And by the way, also Dejounte, now I get that like Dejounte was playing hurt before the Achilles injury too. So like these numbers are what they are. But like he was averaging 17, 6, and 7, but was shooting 39, 29, 82. True shooting percentage was 14% below league average on a player that you are paying $29 million a year this year, up to 33 in 2026-27. You're paying him 20% of the cap the entire way. So this is not as bad as the Joel and Paul George, double dip. I thought it was originally because you gave up assets in addition to having to pay him. It's not that bad. But it's really bad, and it has really, in my opinion, set the Pelicans back. And they have to make significant changes here this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, DeJounte's deal, like, it's just not as big, right? And so that's part of it. DeJounte's also younger than both of those guys. And so maybe you can expect him to bounce back. Also with, like, he's never had the ceiling of either of those guys as well. At the very least, Dyson Daniels is definitely the better player for Atlanta, like, to your point. I mean, I can hear people arguing Dyson hasn't grown so much on the offensive end. I try to bring that every time we talk about Dyson Daniels. I try to talk about how impressed I am with him offensively, even if there are some limitations. But he is perfect playing next to Trae Young and those other wings. We highlighted that last episode when we talked about Ricochet. But it's not just the defense. It's the cutting offensively. It's the ability to hit floaters. He can pass. He can take some ball handling duties when absolutely necessary. So this is one that has always stuck with me. I haven't always been a huge Dejounte Murray fan.
Neither have
anyway.
I. Yeah.
Like, I just think it's a tough archetype at times. But yeah, in terms of like this being a bad move overall, this one is tough for the Pelicans to absorb.
Yeah. And, you know, look, the thing that we talked about in the offseason was we didn't like this deal because we didn't like the fit with Brandon Ingram. And we mentioned, you know, the thing that I keep bringing up is that I like having Zion Williamson is, you know, Bryce is in the circle of hell right now. I like having Zion Williamson play more on the ball and play like point. And Dejounte is a guy that can't really do that. He's just not a guy that's ever really been able to play a substantial amount of time off the ball, which we just learned in Atlanta. Like, that's a thing that we know now, that he can't really play in any sort of like off ball manner. You need to put the ball in his hands for him to have any sort of effectiveness, while we try to bring Bryce back onto the stream here. Yeah, I'm just like very curious to see where the Pelicans go now, because they're down two of their interesting first round picks. They now have to deal with the Dejounte Achilles injury, which, by the way, like, I've tried to avoid bringing up in this conversation. Dejounte Murray is also out with an Achilles injury and probably won't be himself next year either, which means you need to find a way to make this team competitive again, or you just need to rebuild, which probably involves trading CJ, which probably involves figuring out what your plan is with Zion. I don't know what that is. They're going to get a top 6 pick at the very least. Could be number 1, could be number 4, right? The good news is, like, Trey Murphy exploded this year, and, you know, you still have Herb Jones, who's one of the best defensive wings in the entire NBA. But they're in a tough spot. They're in a really, really difficult position now to be able to build this thing. I would expect that they make pretty substantial changes, though, this offseason. I wouldn't expect that this team looks all that similar. I would guess that at the very least Trey and Herb are there, but I would think that anything else could be on the table. And a big reason for that is that this deal just for Dejounte did not go well in any way, shape, or form. And that's what makes it really, really hard to determine where their next step is, in my opinion. Bryce is back. I just, you know, kind of talked about the Pelicans' next steps moving forward, which I genuinely like. I think everything outside of Trey and Herb is on the table at this point.
Yeah, it's a really interesting team to follow in terms of what decisions they make. You know, we've talked about what do you do with Zion and how the type of player he is makes that a really hard thing to figure out. I think I'm with you. Trey has been incredible this year. We've talked about that. Herb, obviously, with what he does defensively. You have some interesting young players, and, you know, Misi, I've always been a Jordan Hawkins guy, but yeah, I don't know what they do with CJ in the last year of his contract. Dejounte, I don't, you know, coming off the injury, obviously you're just gonna have to keep him and play him for now, but it didn't set them back in, like you said, probably the way, as we talked through it, the way it set back the Sixers. But it just, as you look at it now, you giving up 2 first-round picks to a team that then got better because Dyson Daniels is so good and he's on his rookie deal, it does not look good for, like, that's not good process right there.
So I got asked this question, and this is now an aside. So we'll end this real quick here and just note, you know, look, the 5 worst offseason moves. Number 5, Denver signing Dario Saric to a mini mid-level. Number 4, Patrick Williams re-signing with the Chicago Bulls, 5 years, $90 million. Number 3, DeMar DeRozan sign and trade to the Sacramento Kings. Number 2, Dejounte Murray to New Orleans for Dyson Daniels, Larry Nance Jr., and 2 first-round picks. Number 1, Paul George signs with Philly and Joel Embiid extension kind of combined into one, right? I want to note for people as well, like, I didn't include the Randall and Towns move here either. because to me, that's an in-season move that happened after the preseason started. That was like the first week of October. And like that to me is when the season starts. Like that's an in-season move. When we do in-season moves, we'll talk about that at a different date. But I got asked this interesting question by one of our commenters. Shout out to JWST56757. And he was asking on behalf of the Spurs. And it was on our video where we talked through what each team would do if they got the number 3 overall pick.
Okay.
If you were the Pelicans, would you do Trey Murphy for number 3 and Devin Vassell?
Ooh.
I thought that was a really interesting question.
All right. What are the contracts? So my initial reaction was going to be no. I would not trade Trey Murphy for the number 3 pick. So then it comes down to, does Vassell move the needle enough for me? What are our contract situations with those two guys?
So
Murphy's-
Vassell, I think they make like damn near the same amount of money moving forward. Like I think Vassell is like 27-ish a year, and I think Murphy is a little is like right in that ballpark.
Yeah. So
yeah,
Vassell has a interesting contract that descends for a few years and then jumps back at 27. Trey is about to start his, which just goes up by $2 million every year. Percentage of the cap is like Vassell not even 3. Like Vassell's is a little bit less. They both end at the same time.
Yeah.
But very somewhat comparable. Okay, Trey Murphy.
So it's basically Trey Murphy for Devin Vassell
and
like
VJ.
VJ or
Yeah.
Ace Bailey or something.
I want to say no, but that feels like the dumb answer.
So I also kind of thought no. And this is more me thinking that Trey is going to be like a real all-star moving forward.
So that's my instinct as well. Is he's not a guarantee, but I feel better about him. I feel better about him being an all-star than Devin Vassell, Ace Bailey, or VJ Edgecombe. Am I crazy in thinking that?
No, I do. I feel the same way, actually. Yeah,
But
I feel the same way.
But you still get a chance of Ace or VJ becoming that, along with whatever you value Vassell at, right? Like that's the calculation. Because there's a chance Ace or VJ could be all-stars.
For sure. Yeah. It's a good one. This was actually like a genuinely great question.
Wait,
so
which side am I answering it from? The Spurs side or the Pelicans side?
Honestly, you can answer both. Yeah.
Because I feel like if I'm the Spurs, I do that. Right?
I do that if I'm the Spurs. Yes.
Okay. And my hesitation right now is I don't know that I do that if I'm the Pelicans. Good
It's a hard
question.
one. That's a really good question. I think that my answer personally, and this is what I asked a friend who, is around New Orleans and everything. His answer was, I would do it under 2 circumstances. If the Pelicans get a top 2 pick, so their own pick being in the top 2, and if they decide to move off of like Zion and CJ and everything.
Okay, so this
you're
tracks with
rebuilding.
you're rebuilding. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you get Dylan Harper, Devin
Ace
Vassell, Ace Bailey, whatever you want to do, right? Like VJ, however you want to make that work. Herb Jones in between them. You have Yves Missy as your center of the future. Yep. You have Devin Vassell, obviously, as well, still to be able to kind of help these guys along.
On a rebuild, a guy like Vassell makes sense to me. Like, get a guy that can get buckets to keep you in competitive games. Like this is my theory on rebuilding teams. You need a bucket getter that keeps you competitive in more games than you would otherwise. So,
yeah,
this tracks where I was at with New Orleans was if I'm going straight rebuild, is the only way. And not that Trey Murphy couldn't fit that timeline, but if you're really resetting it, I could somewhat like that would be the only way I would get there, is if we're really resetting this timeline into early 20s guys and him as a 24, 25-year-old, move him on. Maybe he wouldn't even be happy then in that role doing that. So this speaks to how high I've grown on Trey Murphy III throughout the season, though. Like,
that's it more for me. It's not even that like I think Trey Murphy is going to make an All-Star game. Is where I agree. Like, if you made me pick over 0.5 All-Star games for Trey Murphy, I would say over right now. I do not think Devin Vassell is going to make an All-Star game, and it's just a real risk. I think you and I are a little bit lower on the top, the 3 to 5 range of this draft than other people are. But it's really more about Trey to me. And now you have Trey Murphy also, by the way, on this deal that is like incredible moving forward, where he's at like 29 million a year, 28 million a year average annual value. And that's just like a huge, enormous win for you as an organization.
You know what people are screaming at us about right now is
what?
Trey Murphy being so low on our 24, under 24, and 24 list. He did not rank very high for us.
Yeah, we probably fucked that up, but whatever. We'll do 25, under 25, and 25, and we'll rectify it.
I mean, there's some other ones. It's fun to look back at in hindsight.
Oh yeah, we fucked up. Like, we had Brandon Miller way too high. Like, it's whatever.
That one was on me. We had Cade too low based on how he's played this year.
Yeah, probably. I don't know if that was on me or you. It's probably on both of us to an extent, I guess.
No, I'm pretty sure I got clowned for how high I had Cade and labeled the Pistons. We had Mobley too low. Amin. It's fun. It's good though.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Trey's been awesome this year is the moral of the story.
The second question I got here from Burnman23. If the Bucks at the end of the year decided to deal Giannis in like a win now team like Houston or something, got the number 1 overall pick, what else on top of the number 1 overall pick could the Bucks get for Giannis?
Oh.
My response was, I do not think the team that had the number 1 overall pick.
Houston's not doing that.
Yeah.
Are they?
I actually don't think people would move Cooper for Giannis right now. And that is incredible. And that's a statement on how unbelievable Cooper is. But I actually don't think people would move Cooper for Giannis right now, given that Giannis is
what team
what
would?
is he? Is he 30, I believe?
I think the question more is what teams are so much win now that they would. So like my mind immediately goes to like, would I know the Lakers can't get the number 1 pick. Would the Lakers trade Cooper for Giannis to give, or do people think Cooper is going to be such an impact that like the Suns were another team I thought of? Would the Suns would trade Cooper for Giannis? Like the Suns were the first team I thought of.
The Suns would, I think.
Like,
I mean, like my immediate thought was like Golden State, but like Golden State, liked the 2 timelines idea. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they would do it. I mean, like Miami likes to go for it all at once, but like, I don't think Miami does it. Like, they're just a little bit too far back right now.
The Nuggets.
Would the Knicks?
The Knicks were another team I wondered.
The Nuggets, interesting. Maybe. Like, if you pair Giannis and Jokic, like if you pair Giannis and Jokic, you probably win the next like 3 titles. So that is a team where you probably do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, my answer for the Lakers is almost no, because my thing is you just extended your window by trading AD for Luka, and now you bring in Cooper, and like Luka, Cooper, Austin Reeves gives you like a 10-year runway to be incredible. I mean, I think what this comes down to is how impactful you think Cooper can be as a rookie and as a second-year player, right? Like, can he come in? Because Cooper Flag playing off of Jokic in Denver would also be incredible stuff.
Incredibly fun. Yeah. Would the Sixers? I don't think the Sixers do it either.
I don't think you.
I think the Sixers take Cooper.
I think they. Don't you think they would do it though? Like,
no, I think that
you don't think they would.
I think they need like cheaper dudes now, like with their salary cap situation being in hell.
That's true.
I mean, look, like realistically, if they were going to do this, like it would have to be Paul George for Paul George and number one for Giannis. You know what I mean? So you'd be getting off of the George deal. I mean, that's another value. But
so like the Suns would have to get off, like they would trade number one and Bradley Beal for Giannis, plus whatever to balance out. But like if you really actually wanted to make money work.
Yeah. So
we have awesome listeners that bring really cool questions. This is a better
this is a genuinely great question. Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
This is a better segment than trivia is because they come with questions that really make you think, and I enjoy that very much.
Yeah. So like the thing is that I think Cooper, in my mind, I will say this, I think Cooper is a better prospect than anybody that's been in the draft of the last 10 years outside of Wemby. I think Cooper, and this is sacrilege for some people, I understand what I'm about to say is sacrilege. I think Cooper is very much on the Anthony Davis level tier of prospect. If not, honestly, when I go back and do like my one and done era prospects that I have to do at some point, there's a decent chance I will have Cooper ahead of Anthony Davis. Because I think Cooper like dominates the game on both ends. Like Anthony Davis dominating the game defensively was like a whole other ball game defense in college. Like it was a total joke. I think Cooper dominates the game on both ends in a way that is a little bit more interesting to me.
And he's so young. I mean, you know, we always talk about age with kids, but with these draft prospects, you know, he's going to play 2 months of his NBA career at 18 years old. And
it's crazy.
So this was a name as
this
well.
This is the one.
No,
Dejounte again comes up in the clutch. The Mavericks are in the lottery, and they would definitely trade the number one pick for Giannis if they could.
But here's what's amazing is they're playing Giannis at point to start next year with AD and Lively on the court as well. Like sign me up for that starting lineup in Dallas with Giannis, AD, and the bigs.
They're the lottery team that would do this.
The actual lottery team.
Yeah. Like the actual lottery team that could theoretically like work through this in their head. They're the one that could do it. The Mavericks.
Yeah.
Shout out Dejounte for making us realize that.
Yeah. Because like OKC, if they were in, like OKC wouldn't do it. I don't think. I think you take Cooper and just roll.
I don't think they would.
You think they go for it? Is that the time they just go for it?
I would need to know how much they're willing to spend. Like, is that ownership group willing to? Because I don't think they'd be excited about moving both number one and Jalen Williams for Giannis. But I can see a world where, yeah, that's interesting. That's actually.
I know OKC can't get to number one. I know that pick is top 6 protected. I was just continuing to throw out names.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you put Shea with Giannis, I mean, it's actually interesting how would those two guys like pair together on the court. The more I think about it,
I had the same thought initially. Like, hey, we always talk about this secondary creation and that they need a little bit extra, and then it's like that's a lot of usage for two guys. Like floor spacing with Giannis when SGA has the ball isn't necessarily the strong suit for Giannis. It would be. I assume they would figure it out. I think it would be more interesting to see how it was figured out than what you might initially think.
Yeah, and Giannis after this year only has 3 years left on his contract, one of which is a player option. So I think it would be difficult to sell a team on only getting 2 years of
Oh, sure. Yeah. The
Giannis for Cooper.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Dallas would probably do it, if I'm being honest still. But yeah, my read is that I still think OKC probably just does Cooper at the end of the day.
Honestly, the Dallas thing just makes me laugh because you trade Luka for the older AD and then you trade Cooper for the older Giannis. Like, it's just like, it would be right on brand. It'd be amazing.
Yeah, it really would be. Shea for Cooper is a more interesting conversation to me. But like, again, it would need to be Shea like signing an extension with you. It would not be as simple as, you know, he has 2 years left on his deal. Like, as of current contract situation, you don't move Shea for Cooper. But if you're extending Shea, you know, I think it becomes a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Loved it.
That was fun.
Yes.
Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky, Motor City Hoops Substack, if you want to check that out. Some extra content creators over there, which is really cool, seeing that grow. Pistons Pulse Podcast, if you want Piston-specific content, which it sounds like they had quite the brawl tonight. So maybe you guys want to tune in as we'll be breaking down some crazy action there. Otherwise, the Game Theory Podcast with the Sam Vecenie.
Yeah, I haven't gotten a chance to like dig into this brawl thing yet. That's why we haven't talked about it. I'm interested to see more. Next episode on Thursday, we'll do the best 5 moves of the 2024 offseason. And then what else? We'll do something else. I'm sure some sort of weird news will break, and we will run through it all. That's all we got. Go subscribe to the Game Theory YouTube channel. Go subscribe to what else? What else do we have here? We've got the podcast feed. Go subscribe to the podcast feed. Many of you listen to the show there. We always really appreciate it. That's all we got. Until next time, we'll talk soon.